All right. This is my first attempt at a serious hangout where I've decided that all the atheists on Google Plus and I guess on YouTube, um, they're not familiar with all the great atheist arguments, with all the more legitimate atheist positions out there. When I mention things like the argument from scale or the evidential problem of evil versus just the logical problem of evil, or when I tell people what the argument from divine hiddenness really is, or when I mention evil twin arguments that are mentioned even as recently as a month ago in philosophical peer-reviewed journals, people are just unaware of them. A lot of times it's mostly just science fanboying or fangirling and criticizing Christianity. But there's so much more to it, and there's so many more different interesting topics, and there's so many different ways you can argue against theism or argue for theism. And you don't have to do it in such a way that's uninspired, like a lot of the pop or new atheists do so. There's so many fascinating ways to go about it, and it's all in the same world of debate. I'm really interested in atheist debates and debates in general, and so when I've come to Google Hangouts to debate with other people, I'm shocked at how much people need to be brought up to speed about things. And I'm shocked at how much I still need to be brought up to speed about things as well. So I figured I can learn from people here. I can learn, and hopefully maybe I can deliver some sort of half-assed important message out there that there are arguments for atheism and against theism that are rigorous and discussed by thoughtful people interested in this topic. And some of them are quite persuasive. So tonight I picked one that a lot of new atheists and a lot of people less familiar with philosophical atheistic arguments would be familiar with, and that is the argument from physical minds. So I took some notes. I got some different views, and hopefully I wrote down some definitions, and I'm just going to give this argument, and hopefully some people will come in. I'll post a link to this hangout in the comments section after I'm done rambling. And we'll start off talking about that. And I bet you, because I go all over the place, we'll talk about other things. Hopefully it will be focused on the more substantial arguments that atheism has to offer. So I'm going to pause talking because I cannot multitask to link to this hangout on Google Plus. And then also, after I'm done giving this argument, and maybe in 45 minutes, if people are just over it, we'll talk about other arguments. And we'll talk about just debate or the nature of debate or issues that people have and people are running into when they want to talk about this stuff. Also, this is ultimately, this is all very selfish. I want to become a better debater, and I was told what I should do is write out what arguments I would use in a debate and take each of the separate arguments, and go into Google Hangouts and run them against different people and see how it works. Oh, this is exciting. Someone actually wants to come in. Awesome. Helena. Awesome. Awesome. And see how it works. And so it's going to be me talking, presenting the arguments. And so because of that, I am going to present the argument from physical minds against the most generic definition of theism. Theism is that, and the theism I'm running this argument against is the belief in a all-powerful, all-knowing, all good and loving, eternal, non-physical person who is the creator and sustainer of our universe. And some would like to call this person God, and sometimes he would like to be referred to as a he, but sometimes a she. It depends. It's theism. It's one God, and it's a God that's intervenes, all that wonderful stuff. And awesome. One of my favorite theists just joined, and he told me earlier that he is running on empty and really tired. And so this is just perfect because that means that I have an advantage. How's it going, Brandon?
Hey, you are one of my favorite atheists too, so a lot of love in this room tonight.
I'm trying to. Who's my favorite atheist that I've run into? I I won't say that it's Cliff because Cliff doesn't like being labeled at all. But there is a person, Cliff Stamp, and
well, Helena is pretty cool.
Yes. Helena has like the bluest eyes, or when she goes on, she always wears really blue shirts, so her eyes are just like
it makes all of her arguments so much more convincing.
It's like if you're not convinced by her arguments, you will fall into those pools. But she also, when I was in a hangout with her and a couple of other people, and they were talking free will, and I'm not very good with free will, but they were just like I was a fly, privy to just a whole bunch of smart, uh, like forceful proponents of different perspectives on free will, and I'm like, whoa. She mentioned she wants, I think she implied she wants to come in, and I'm very interested in her view on this argument, which I haven't presented yet. But I was laying out that for at least 45 minutes, I want to try and focus on this argument and different perspectives on it. But since you and I have talked about the argument from divine hiddenness, if you want to say something about that. And I also recently, the argument from divine hiddenness actually has a defensive argument that goes along with it. And that argument works really well against Calvinist. And I just absent-mindedly ran it against, hey Dex, let me broadcast you. I just absent-mindedly ran it against Matt Slick, and I was surprised at how like nonsensical he came off. And Matt Slick, like it can't help but like the guy, so I feel bad saying that. But just is it's an argument that I don't think a lot of Calvinists run into because it's based off it's a really evidential argument. And now I have to go into the argument later tonight. I'll definitely go into it. It's called the demographics of theism. But
well, I never liked Calvinism, so that's pretty cool.
well, like Calvinism, it seems like everyone thinks you got to come at it from a different angle. You can't use divine hiddenness, but I think you can. But I got to save that for another hangout. I got to stick with with arguments from physical minds. How's it going, Dex? How's it going, Cliff?
Good, good.
Good.
Awesome. No one likes Calvinists, not even Calvin. No one likes Calvinism, not even Calvinists. That's essentially what Matt Slick said. He says not even the elect want to join in a relationship with God. And then
But they try really, really hard to like it, though.
yeah, it's.
Make it
I guess
about
that's why they're the
God's
elect.
sovereignty.
They're good fakers. Okay, enough Calvinism.
Yeah, I don't even like to talk about Calvinism.
Um, okay, so this argument, the argument from physical minds, it deals with a lot of philosophy of minds, which, frankly, I don't find that topic all that interesting. But there are a couple things you want to define, and so I've already defined the kind of God this argument is against. I think another caveat is that since this is the God of theism, especially the big three theistic views, they hold another. They have another very core belief, and I guess I'll get to that in a bit. But before that, let me just describe the different types of arguments that are familiar with the mind, what's known as the mind-body problem. Are you guys familiar with that? Do I have to
I think I'm pretty familiar with it.
It's like we have minds, we have bodies. How do they work? We can't find a magnet in between, so it's going to be even harder to figure out how they work. And various views have come up. Most famously, there's Descartes, um, who came up with a view called substance dualism, where an immaterial substance and the mind is um, where our minds are made up of an immaterial substance, and that it's not merely a collection of thoughts. And this is often called Cartesian dualism. Dualism in general is that the mental, physical, mind, body, or consciousness brain are radically different types of things. And there's also other types of dualists that are not as into the immaterial, such as interactionist dualism, which I'm partial to. And then there's epiphenomenalism, which is that, hold on, I'm going too fast. Interactionist dualism is that the mind and body causally, that the mind and the brain causally influence each other. And epiphenomenalism is that the mental events influence the physical events, but not vice versa, I believe, correct? And there's other views. One of the other one that I'll mention is physicalism, which is essentially that the mind is the brain. That's a very simplistic version of it, but that's I don't think I need to explain it any more than that. The reason, what's important here is that um, this is the argument. This is one of the arguments that it can be presented against theism, and it's an evidential argument. And again, it's a happy circumstance that if I'm going to try and use this hangout as a gateway hangout to bring in all the people influenced by Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or Daniel Dennett into like legit atheistic arguments. I'm using one that is more popular amongst the new atheist, and once I bring them in, then I can start talking about the evil God challenge or divine hiddenness. So it's important to note that this is an evidential argument, and it's not as strong as other arguments, and it's a lot stronger, I think, if it's mixed with other arguments for naturalism. But I think I should get into that after I frickin' say the argument. So here's the argument at a glance. The empirically supported dependency of the mind on the physical brain do not support core doctrines of theism, and if anything, make sense on atheism. Thus, it's more evidence against theism and against God's existence. And here it is. Here's the argument in kind of like a syllogism. One, if God exists, then minds would survive the death of the brain. Two, there is a lot of empirical evidence saying minds do not survive the death of the brain. Three, therefore, and this is the conclusion, therefore, this is a lot of empirical evidence against God's existence. If we unpack that and if we make it a little bit more cogent, it's pretty much that our consciousness or personalities or minds will survive the physical destruction of the brain. And this is important when you're arguing against theism because either because the big three often posit that once our physical bodies die, we enter into the afterlife as through some sort of supernatural vessel, often referred to as a soul, depending on which theistic view you hold. Or that our personalities or minds will await until we get into a physical heaven, like in Islam, or until the general end-time resurrection, where we will enter our new end-time resurrection body. It all depends on your different theological standings. And when we look at the second premise, when we look at the other important aspect of this argument is that, so besides souls, is that there already does exist a non-physical person who has a non-physical mind, not dependent on a physical brain or any type of physical like body or substrate, which is the word that I've heard thrown about by certain theists. And often he is called God. So this argument suggests that both the soul and the nature of God are undermined by the fact that there's no empirical evidence supporting the existence of or supporting the contention that the mind can survive the death of the physical body. And in looking more for earlier arguments of this, or earlier straightforward renditions of this argument, I was actually surprised that it was Michael Tooley in 1994 in a debate against William Lane Craig who flat out used this as an argument. I mean, I'm surprised that 1994 is when using this as an argument was first thought of. I can't imagine that's true. And in order to support this argument, Michael Tooley, who is a really good atheist philosopher, hopefully if I do more of these hangouts, I'll name drop a bunch of the more thoughtful, more awesome atheist philosophers out there, Michael Tooley being one of them. You know, maybe I should do the rule of threes. Michael Tooley and Evan Fales and Graham Oppie. Those are good atheist philosophers. Maybe I should put them in the comment section later. Who knows? Anyways, Michael Tooley, who is an interactionist dualist, so he simply argues that cognitive science tells us that if the mind is not the brain, then the mind is heavily dependent on the brain. And key aspects of the human mind, among others, demonstrate such dependency. One key aspect is that if we stimulate parts of the brain, then corresponding cognitive experiences occur. Anything like drinking coffee, caffeine affects certain parts of the brain, to taking ADHD medication like Adderall or I don't know, Strattera, to even like putting, I think scientists have even put magnets next to the brain, like freaking magnets. Anyways, all these things have an effect on the brain. Furthermore, certain injuries to the brain destroys the ability to continue mental states, suggesting that once the brain begins to stops functioning, then the mind stops is obviously affected. So if it stops functioning and then it dies, then it should lead to the mind also no longer existing as well. Nothing mental happens without something physical happening. And this is substantiated by other injuries that destroy certain mental capacities in our brains. Like scientists can go into your brain and mess with the part of your brain that allows you to recognize the faces of your close ones. And so when, hold on, I said way too much. Scientists can mess with a part of your brain that that cuts off the link that allows what we take in visually to associate with the faces of our relatives and our close loved ones. So after scientists have done that to our brains, and we go and we talk to our loved ones, we are not able to recognize them due to this effect on their brains. So there's more to it, but I've been talking for a bit. Let me get to a little bit more. Since souls are immaterial or purely mental, it's unclear how any minds can be sustained in the soul if the brain dies. And if all our empirical evidence shows that minds stop existing when the brain dies, then there's no evidence to support the existence of a non-physical person called God. And I can probably skip that and go into it later. And then I've gone into objections, but I think there's other key points to this argument that makes it that might preempt an issue that I believe Cliff will bring up, and that is that on the, let's say theism is a hypothesis. It's an attempt to explain things. On the theistic hypothesis, you can use interactionist dualism on theism. It's perfectly compatible with theism. But dualism is one of many different possible solutions to the mind-body problem that theism can offer. So it makes it less likely on the hypothesis of theism that interactionist dualism is the case than it would be on the hypothesis of naturalism or on a godless hypothesis. And so that's another point I think might be important to point out. And so I've been talking for a bit, and I guess I made Dex leave. What do you guys think?
Well, you said a whole lot of stuff, and I think you know a lot of the terminology a lot better than I do.
I just looked this up
So,
like a couple hours ago. I don't know.
oh, well, you have a couple hours on me then. um,
Brandon, just briefly explain what is your position on the connection between the mind and the brain
Mm.
from your theist point of view? What do you see as the mind? What do you see as the brain? I'm assuming that that's not going to be really controversial. And what do you see as the relationship between the two of them?
Well, I, for a while, took kind of a computationalist point of view of consciousness, and that just means that consciousness it's just like a computer. It's computation. Um, so some people think that it actually feels like something to be a computer. Like there is some consciousness going on inside of computing systems, but I don't take that view. I don't take it that far. And also, I'm kind of open to other ideas now. Like the latest idea that I've heard is that consciousness is a kind of integrated information system, which there are a lot of different theories of consciousness, but for all of them, I think consciousness depends on a physical substrate. That's the word that we were using in the prior hangout. So, I mean, I don't know how consciousness would exist without that. It almost seems incoherent to suggest that consciousness can exist without a physical substrate to exist on.
So when our physical body is destroyed, what happens to our conscious?
Well, probably the most parsimonious explanation is that we cease to exist, or our consciousness ceases to exist. However, there is another perspective, although I tend to think it's unparsimonious, and it's that our brains actually operate more like a cell phone. So our soul is out there somewhere, and it's communicating to the material world through the brain. So it seems like the brain is the source of consciousness, when actually it's just a conduit for consciousness. Like if you handed a cell phone to a medieval person, they might think that the cell phone is intelligent and talking to you. But in reality, it's a person on the other end of the phone speaking through the cell phone. So I don't know if that illustration helps, but that's
So
one point of view.
after we die, and assuming we go into heaven, can our consciousness interact in any way with other consciousness then, if there's no like brains?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Like I'm assuming, like, do we have physical bodies in heaven, like under the way you view theism?
Uh, that's a complicated question, a little bit complicated. Um, because I mean, if you're talking about the Bible says we receive a new body someday. So it kind of seems like almost the difference between software and hardware. Where
The way, I mean, yeah, the Bible, yeah, it says we're going to receive a new body, and I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, there's some sort of like save state, or it's in storage somewhere. There has to be our personality is frozen somewhere in some place for the resurrection body to, I mean, what's
yeah.
the resurrection body given, you know? And could it just be that our consciousness does just cease to exist, but then when end time comes, or when when our resurrection bodies are ready to go, it it all of a sudden manifests in those bodies. And also, heaven, it would be awesome if like some Muslims came in to correct me, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that heaven on Islam is a physical place, but there's still like you still need like our minds need to somehow jump from the this physical world into heaven, which isn't in existence in this physical world. So our mind still needs to survive the death of this body.
Yeah, if you take the view,
So-
though, that Brandon said that our brain is actually nothing more than essentially something that allows interaction of our consciousness with this world, then our consciousness or the mind could be outside the brain. And so once this brain is destroyed, the consciousness or mind is still there. And then in heaven, when we get our new bodies, then again, it has a conduit. But it's basically like saying if you break your cell phone, all your minutes and your plan and everything are still there because they exist outside of your cell phone. But then as soon as I give you a new cell phone, you can talk again. If you view the mind and the body as having that relationship, there isn't a problem there.
When you mention
So
when you mentioned that relationship, I thought that actually the mind should be the satellite, and the cell phone is the brain.
Yeah,
If anything, right,
yeah.
Brandon?
yeah, I guess so. Well, so then it raises the question, okay, how could we possibly tell the difference in the real world? How could we possibly tell if the brain produces consciousness or if it's merely a conduit for consciousness? And there are two lines of argument. I'm not sure you could call both of them line of argument, but there are two avenues that I would like to research more. You'll probably scoff at one of them, which is near-death experiences. And then the other avenue is, I don't even know how to say it, quantum consciousness as it relates to the quantum world. And I don't know a whole lot about either of those arguments, but what intrigues me is that there are Nobel laureates who have said that you can't understand quantum effects without consciousness, or they've said that consciousness is a fundamental part of quantum reality. And then near-death experiences. What intrigues me there is Antony Flew, who became a theist after many decades of being a prominent atheist. He was actually persuaded that some near-death experiences are genuine, but he favored some kind of materialistic explanation for it. But he was persuaded that consciousness did not fully reside in the brain somehow, because people had memories of things that occurred while they were brain dead, essentially. So I haven't investigated these avenues of argument for myself in very much depth, but it's really intriguing to me that these very respectable people, really intelligent people, saw something of value in those arguments. So that, to me, leaves the door open to actually being possible in the first place, that it's possible to discern between whether the brain produces consciousness versus the brain is the conduit for consciousness. That might actually be somewhat testable.
All right. Well, to cover the quantum mechanics thing, part of it, actually both of these are covered by this one debate I might suggest to you, which happened a couple years ago between, I think it's Ibn Alexander, who went through a near-death experience, and I think it's Raymond Moody, who was the person who coined the term near-death experience. They went up against theoretical physicist Sean Carroll and neurologist Stephen Novella in a intelligence to squared debate on the argument over the topic is death, or the topic officially was called death not final. And I'm not sure if this is just kind of a cheap shot against your mention of quantum, uh, quantum mechanics. But Sean Carroll gave kind of a good quote. He said that, well, throughout the debate, Sean Carroll felt that quantum mechanics wasn't really relevant to the debate, but I bet you Cliff can beg to differ. But he said that there was an MIT physicist, Scott Aronson, who says that as far as we can tell, quantum mechanics is confusing and consciousness is confusing, so maybe they're the same thing. And that kind of seems to be an important intuitive step in the use of quantum mechanics when describing the brain. But I just don't see how that can. It still doesn't give us any explanation on the existence of God himself. It may explain why interactionist dualism or some other form of dualism is more persuasive than straight up physicalism, which again, physicalism is the mind is the brain. But I think there still needs to be a lot more elaborated upon for the soul and for God's nature as well.
Well, I think it's raises an important point that consciousness may not require a brain, which was a really crucial point in our last discussion, because what we kept coming back to was if you infer consciousness from the effects of consciousness, then you're also obligated to infer a brain, because all conscious beings that we know of have a brain. So these other avenues of argument explore that question of whether, in fact, consciousness does require a brain, or if brain is just the conduit. Consciousness can exist without it.
Well, the other issue is that, I don't want to bring up something else to focus on what you just said. I suggest you listen to that debate, by the way, because the guy Ibn Alexander, ultimately, again, I don't find near-death experiences all that persuasive, but Ibn Alexander is he's like the living example of an anecdote. His experience it's very compelling. It's very superficially persuasive, if that can make sense at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like he talks about his brain being dead. He talks about all these different things, and yeah, his presentation was one of the best out in the whole entire debate. Actually, his opening at least. But the Stephen Novella was really good about showing that every experience that Ibn Alexander described could have happened during the time his brain actually recovered from being brain dead, and all those experiences can actually be induced just by like a medicine, like a chemical stimuli. They can put different types of chemistry, and they can give us different pills and stuff, and it will induce the types of experiences that Ibn Alexander actually describes. The other issue with the debate is that the moderator was awful. But that's the issue with earlier I mentioned something that I disagreed with about the quantum mechanics issue, but now turning to the near-death experience thing that you brought up, one of the responses to the near-death experience, besides the anecdotal nature of them, right off the bat, but it's also that many of them are can be induced through neurological experimentation, and there's
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mhm.
I agree that there are a lot of elements with near-death experience that can be reproduced experimentally. The only part about near-death experiences that I find possibly convincing is where the the person experiencing the near-death experience um, has knowledge about things that occurred while they were brain dead.
Hmm.
Um, and those are claims that I need to really investigate a lot more. But that's the only, I think that's the only element about them that I find convincing. Like even things like, oh, I viewed the room from the ceiling. I was over in the corner watching my body, and they can describe the room from that point. I think um, you can get a pretty good idea of what a room would look like from different angles, if you're,
I
I mean, I don't
remember.
know. That doesn't
I
seem
don't know.
convincing.
I don't know if these were arguments or if these. I don't know if this was actually like. I don't even know how you could try. But people, when I hear this brought up, people talk about how why not put it like at hospitals, all hospitals, when you have the very
Put that
tops of all
sign.
those shelves, you should put like
You are
you should
dead.
put you should put like the ace of spades or
Right.
random cards on top
I
of that and see if
I
people say the ace of spades is on that and that's a two of hearts or
I
something.
heard that that was done successfully, but again, that's something I have to look into. I'm skeptical of it, but I did hear about that, so I have to look and see what the sources are.
That's pretty
But
cool.
even if that wasn't actually done successfully,
That
um,
that's actually a different
I've heard.
phenomenon too. That's out of body experiences, not
Oh,
necessarily
right.
near death experiences too.
But it does
They
suggest
probably
something about the
overlap too.
non-locality of the brain, though,
Very
or
yeah.
of the consciousness. I mean,
Mm. Uh yeah, no, I agree. One yeah, that would be really cool if it was. Although, I mean, you
I
still
do
get
have a few books that I have at least one book that I'm going through now, and I have a few other resources I'm going to go through. So maybe
what
at
what
another time we can really hash this out.
what are the odds it's 52 cards in a deck? That's like 152. Like it should be like tarot cards, or it should just say like some random thing. It should
Yeah,
say hold on
something.
to your butts or something like from Jurassic Park.
Right. Where
Uh,
it's low probability that they could guess it.
you know, I think I really need, even though I hated the moderator for that debate, I need to hear it again because there's a lot of gems in it. Sean Carroll, who I think he's a great speaker, and I want to hear him just do a flat out naturalism versus theism or argument against God debate, but he hasn't really done that yet. But anyways, he mentioned an example that's also telling of these near-death experiences, and that's I think a little girl had a near-death experience, and when she described what she saw, she described an old fat guy who had a white beard and who was wearing red clothing, and it turned out she was describing Santa Claus. And people in India, they'll describe things that are important in Indian theistic, or not theistic, actually, polytheistic, in Indian religious beliefs. They'll describe, you're not going to hear someone uh, in the middle of New Delhi saying that he had a vision of the angel Moroni. Uh, and actually found out it was Angel Moroni because Angel Moroni had to describe who he was, that he has to do with Mormonism, that kind of thing. They're culturally, they're correlated
specific.
with
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I hear is that there's a really powerful chemical called DMT that goes into your brain when you go through that death process, and so like I think people are really probably tripping a lot when they're getting close to death. But that's definitely not where I would try to construct an argument from.
I think one thing that we need to be very careful about, it would seem to be that if somebody was brain dead and they actually continued to have distinct neurological events, it would seem to be evidence that the mind is something beyond the brain at first glance. However, it has to be realized that determining brain death is one of the most non-trivial things in medical science. For example, generally, like in movies, you see a flat line, like an EEG flat line, and it says there's no activity in the brain. This dude is dead. However, that essentially just means that the level of activity in the brain is so low that it doesn't show up. Some people can go under anesthetic to such an extent that they will flatline. And the other thing to realize is the brain is a big thing, and it's a big bunch of things. So parts of it can be completely dead, and other parts of it can be completely active. And it's even a part like the cerebellum, which is what most people think of the brain as your actual, where consciousness and thoughts, or where we think it arises. You could imagine that a major portion of that could be essentially dead, but only a really tiny amount of it could still actually be alive. But that still possibly could give rise to distinct neurological events. So I think even if we did those experiments where that and the people were having distinct neurological events after they had measured brain death, I think one of the hardest things would be, were they actually having absolutely no physical activity in the brain? I don't think that's trivial to assert.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I just think that there's more research that we have to do.
I mean, yeah, and like I said, even though I labeled it anecdotal, but I mean, Ibn Alexander, he was quite compelling, and the it just speaks to the ability of this organ of our brain, and this is kind of where the argument. So this is why why I ultimately decided, even though it's a topic I'm not as interested in as other naturalistic topics, ultimately there's three reasons why I chose to go with this argument. And that's because two things are covered with it: the soul and the non-physical existence of God, as as an immaterial person, or as a disembodied person, but also because of the turn. Um, it's we have these huge, delicate, energy sucking organs that require, I think it's 20% of the of our caloric intake, or of the energy we need every day, and they are complex thinking machines, but they also have a whole bunch of crap wrong with them. For example, this eye is actually linked to that. This eye is linked to that, and it can be messed with through caffeine, through just very, very what seems like insubstantial things. Um, that speaks of a mind that is the product of an evolutionary process that is occurring over a long period of time, and that's getting more and more
But
That's
well,
just it's not persuasive to you.
no, it sounds like the bad design argument.
No, this is it's actually just an argument for a non-theistic. You know, it makes more sense. Our brains being this big and being like being the way they are, it makes more sense if there was no God than if there was a God. Because if there was a God, then we would then the soul. It seems like a soul would be, that might be helpful, or that's all we would need. Uh,
I think the thing to really focus on is this entire argument is a probabilistic argument. You can
yes.
always explain it under theism. So you can always say, yes, theism can explain it. But does theism explain it in a simpler way? Is it more parsimonious? Does it give a greater scope? If it can be explained without theism, if it can be explained quite naturally under physicalism, then I think it's a hard step. It doesn't say that theism is false, but it basically says there's a higher probability of physicalism. Like there's no like if we weren't talking about this, if we just had two other arguments or two other ideas that we were actually proposing, the way that we would interpret them would seem to indicate that we would go with physicalism in that case, or the analogous of it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't match up with two important aspects of theism, but it also doesn't. It also is one of several different ways theism could explain the dependency of the mind on the brain. So it makes it less likely that this is the way that our brains would turn out to be if theism were true.
I don't think that's, to me, it's not very persuasive because you're saying God wouldn't do it this way. It seems
No,
like,
not necessarily. I don't know if that's it because
well,
it's
it's
more
all,
say, it's more saying that I mean it's not necessarily saying what God it, it's more saying that um, it's better explained than if you never even posited the existence of a non-physical being or a person and the existence of a of our minds, which can go beyond the death of our physical bodies. Um, we don't need to have those extra, tendrils uh, to explain
Just
what's
think of it
but
happening.
this way.
it's,
Just think of it this way. Like, say you know two guys, and one guy always paints red houses, and another guy can paint anything at all. He might paint the cat, he might paint the bridge, he might paint the red house, but he just spins and you go by and you see like one guy always paints red houses, and another guy can paint absolutely anything at all. So you go back on Friday, and the two guys are not there. There's just a painting there, and the painting is of a red house. Who do you say painted it? The guy that always paints red houses. That's the guy that any like in any kind of if I was to ask it if we weren't talking about God, we were just talking about anything else and we walked into that room and I said, Brandon, who do you think painted that? You'd say the dude who always paints red houses. That's the most likely guy. And if I was to say, well sure the other guy could have painted that, you would have said, yeah, well he could have, but that guy could have painted everything. The other guy just paints red houses.
well,
That's the
yeah,
argument Joe was making.
but the problem is that you actually, in reality, though, we're talking about two guys that paint anything, though. That's the real situation. Um,
No, like under physicalism, like this thing couldn't be true. Like under physicalism, like the mind and body couldn't exist. Like there is no mind. It's just a brain. There is the brain and the mind. Like there's just this is the brain. So you couldn't have like the brain exist after death.
well, I was referring to the argument that like the design of the brain uh, appears to be more natural than supernatural or theistic. Like the fact that our eyes are switched or something. Like they're this
Yeah,
design, quote
I
unquote, flaw.
I
That
wasn't
was what I was
necessarily.
responding to.
Yeah, and this is an issue that it wasn't necessarily an argument. An argument against God poorly designing our brains. It was an argument that that's the way you would expect the naturalistic processes that are substantiated in
Why?
science. I'm sorry?
Okay, well, why would you expect natural processes to do that?
Well, because things like evolution don't care if they don't care if a part of our brain is messed up. Then hey, we have another person. It doesn't
Right.
care if a part of our brain is messed up. Then we won't recognize our kids or something. We will end up being like that guy from whatchamacallit,
Well,
from the
that's
newest Arrested Development season. Hey, Mohammed, I don't know who you are, so if you want to talk for a little bit in the side chat to make sure. I've had bad experiences in Brett Keen's hangouts. I don't trust anyone. But I'm really glad someone else has joined because when I talk too much, I get sick of myself.
well, what I'm trying to point out is that if we follow your argument, it still always comes down to flawed design. Like you're saying, you're not
No,
making.
no. It's saying that evolution, the processes that it's just saying that it's not that it's a flawed design. That's why it's more likely that it wasn't created by God. That sounds like it could be a completely different argument. It's that there's no clear evidence of two important parts of theism, and it turns out that processes that conform with a universe run by with naturalism that don't posit an extra God, it turns out that they sufficiently describe how it goes. And one of those processes is evolution, and evolution is it's not perfect. Evolution is survival of the
But that's
who
the
can bang the
assumption.
next person.
But
That's the what?
But you see, I think you've just jumped back into that assumption though, because you used the word perfect. So you are fundamentally assuming imperfection in certain design features. That's what I mean. I don't think you're consciously doing this, but if you listen to what you're saying, you keep coming back to words like perfect or I don't remember what word you used, but you pointed out a flaw in the way the eyes are designed.
Yeah. It seems like it's the processes. I see what you're saying now. I'm saying that these are processes more consistent with something that doesn't need doesn't need it to that doesn't care if it causes inconveniences, whereas that implicitly assumes that God would design the brain in such a way that shows that he does care. That if he left our brain with flaws, it would bother us, right?
I don't
Yeah,
think we
well, I
need
guess
to go
so.
that far.
I'm just pointing out that
Was I just incoherent right there?
Yeah, I don't even think you need to go ahead. All you have to do is make this thing. Could God design us without any apparent flaws? Could God design us with flaws? He would be able to do both of them. But can an evolutionary model produce an organism that is completely optimized without flaws? Not under our current understanding of it, it can't.
No.
Yeah, but then the flaws. I mean, you have to see that's the
You're
it's a
raring to do the
theological.
design argument, aren't you?
What's that?
You're raring to do the design argument, aren't you?
Oh no, I'm just I'm just trying to point out that I think there are some underlying assumptions that maybe you aren't aware that you're making.
No, I can understand. I was trying to agree with you, but I messed up. I think you're right to an extent, but I think Cliff is right in that I don't really even need them.
I think
It,
you might be saying that you're assuming it's an imperfection, but it might be that it's not. Is that what you're saying,
Right.
yeah,
Brad?
Yeah, that's one thing I'm saying. I have a number of problems with that line of argument, but that is one
Hmm.
problem that I have with it, is that you can't know that it's imperfect. So it's essentially, you could say that it's structured as an argument from ignorance.
Yeah, but I'm more concerned with the fact that theism needs to account for God's nature as a. I mean, yeah, it needs to account for God's existence as a disembodied mind, and it needs to account for where our minds go, if it's going to go into a soul, into the afterlife, or into a resurrection body. Um, whereas the views, what we do see make much more sense on a explanatory model about the world that that doesn't posit those two things I just mentioned. It makes much more sense on an atheistic or a non-theistic uh, view of the world. Those two things aren't substantiated in the empirical evidence, and so it makes it less likely that theism is true. And it just so happens that what we do see substantiated in the empirical evidence points more to a godless scenario. That makes it more likely that theism is makes it less likely that theism is true as well. Does that make sense?
Well, it's not a matter of that making sense. You've just stated a bunch of conclusions.
I think I made. I mean, I think
That wasn't an argument.
no. I think I made the argument.
No, you said that atheism makes more sense. Basically, you just said that atheism makes more sense. I didn't
I don't
hear
think
that.
so.
I didn't hear. Maybe you can restate the argument part of it.
The argument is that if theism were true, then we would see things about the world that substantiate the existence of um, minds surviving the death of physical material, physical brains. And we would see evidence substantiating the claim that there exists at least one disembodied mind out there called God. However, all the evidence we do have on minds tells us that if they are not the brain or substrate, then they are highly dependent on the functioning of the brain or the substrate. Nothing mental happens without something physical happening first. Um, this view is compatible with theism, but it means that there's no evidence supporting the existence of, I'm just going to say souls for brevity, and substantiating God's nature. But it also is competing with a lot of other views that are compatible with theism that could account for those things. And so it makes it less likely that um, that this is the case if theism were true. Whereas this view is compatible with atheism, and atheism doesn't posit the existence of doesn't posit our mind's ability to survive death, nor does it posit a non-physical person, a non-physical mind existing out there. Um, and so the evidence fits with an atheistic hypothesis, whereas it doesn't fit with key tenets of the theistic hypothesis, which makes it less likely that theism is true and more persuasively likely that atheism is true. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but um, the assumption is about the evidence. So your assumption in what you just said is that the evidence is more consistent with atheism.
It
So
definitely
I
doesn't point
consider
to
I
theism.
consider
Hmm?
I consider it an open question on most of the evidences we've talked about. Now, you might be more read about it than I am, but from what I've seen, I consider it, at least for myself, an open question.
So what, what one example of evidence do you feel is either not supported by a naturalistic worldview or is necessarily supported by a theistic worldview? Because anything is supported by God, right? Because God is not constrained. So like God could have made us with great big giant energy dependent brains. God could have made it any way he wants. So you can't sort of falsify God by looking at what we could have done. In that way, like there's nothing that God couldn't have done. But there are things that natural processes, as far as we know, couldn't have done. But so what line of evidence would you look at and you say, well, this either isn't compatible with naturalism or it's necessarily compatible with theism?
Well, one thing we talked about already would be near-death experiences, which I need to research more. But the interesting thing that I've noticed when I hear skeptics talk about near-death experiences is they avoid, or I don't know why, but they don't talk about the strongest evidence with those experiences, which is where individuals describe events that occurred while they seem to have been brain dead. So it's interesting to me that point rarely comes up. It's always, well, we can make people see bright lights and we can make them see culture-specific entities or whatever. It's never. It's at least I haven't really heard skeptics talk about the other aspect.
I thought I did talk about it though, with Ibn Alexander.
So like,
well, they
what
might have in that
experience-
debate. I'll have to review that. But that's one area
But like,
where
what one experience would you think like would be really strong? Like, what's just one example of an after-death experience that would be really hard for naturalism to explain?
well, if a person was brain dead, and they described some of the medical procedures that occurred during brain death, that would seem pretty significant to me.
I think that would be an interesting observation, and I think we would have to look at two things. One, the possibility that the mind is somehow observing, and then once the brain restarts, it sort of restarts it. That would, I guess, be one way of looking at it. The other way would be that the way we're categorizing the brain as being dead isn't accurate for reasons that I said before. So those are the two things I think we would need to be very careful of before we would reach a conclusion.
Predicated on being able to know that the brain is truly inactive.
Right, and the hard thing about some of these things is that it's not ethical at all to do these experiments, right?
Maybe we can find some volunteers.
I volunteer G-Man, we can do it to him.
Or Pillbox?
Yeah. You wouldn't get, even if it was true, you'd never tell. It'd be completely irrational what if come out of it.
There are a lot of people I talk to I already think are brain dead, so we could just do
That's a good point. Yeah, but the main evidence that I like to argue for is the information systems that you and I have talked about a lot, Cliff.
We're not doing design, man.
But it's evidence.
We're not doing well. Okay, yeah, okay, because we've been doing this for a lot longer than what I wanted to go on. Go ahead.
You got. I wasn't really gonna go into it. I was just Cliff asked me the evidence.
How about this? I'll make that. How about arguments against the design arguments? Maybe that will be not the next one. If this actually, if this is fruitful at all, but I'll make that something.
But I can see where Brandon's coming from, because I mean, what he's basically saying is, okay, on your side, you have a bunch of observations, and they correspond very strongly with naturalism. And you're saying you don't have a bunch of observations that you would expect if theism is true. Mm-hmm. What he's saying is that he does have observations which he finds strongly corresponds to theism, but do not strongly correspond to naturalism. So instead of basically like dealing directly, he's saying, well, I can propose evidence from my side as well.
And another thing, when you're talking about a shift in paradigms, um, the way you begin to shift paradigms is you discover anomalies in the paradigm. And so if a near-death experience could be verified, I would consider that an anomaly. Or if any effect that can't be explained by natural unconscious processes was discovered, I would consider that to be an anomaly.
I think that's one of the hardest questions to ask, and it's not at all trivial, even in the sciences, because it relates back to essentially like an anomalous experience. Is how do you tell if something is a miracle or not? And how do you tell when something supersedes physical law? And it's not at all a trivial question. There's many points in history of science where we have made observations and they have defied all physical law. And there's two things you can do at that point. You can say, well, that's a supernatural thing, so we need to postulate something outside of natural. Or you can say there's some natural thing which we don't understand. And I think fairly and justly you need to explore at least somewhat, at least both of them.
Yeah, well, I don't accept that distinction, though.
Natural
Between
and non-natural?
supernatural and natural. Yeah, I don't accept that that's a real distinction. I think what really happens is we had a set of laws and we found something that contradicted them. So technically, the thing that contradicted them was supernatural to our set of laws at that time. And we adjusted to incorporate that into a new set of laws.
So you don't believe supernatural things exist?
I don't believe that supernatural is a useful category.
So you believe God obeys physical laws?
Well, I think that God, well, maybe, but maybe he created the physical laws too. I mean, I've never heard a very good definition of supernatural. I've heard many different definitions too. I've heard the definition that the supernatural simply exists outside of our universe. So then I say, well, what about the multiverse? Does that mean the multiverse is supernatural then? And then I heard this other guy that I talk to a lot. He insists that, quote unquote, the universe is everything that exists. He also says that God, or the supernatural, exists outside the universe. So then I respond to him, so you're saying that the supernatural exists outside of everything that exists. So any definition I've ever heard of the supernatural is either incoherent or it's applied inconsistently. So I don't accept that supernatural is a real category or is a useful category.
So if you don't accept that supernatural is a useful category, does God exist in the same way that we exist?
Well, I don't really know what you mean. What do you mean?
I'm trying to understand your position because, like, if you don't accept the division between supernatural and natural, it means everything is natural, which means natural doesn't have meaning either.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I think, yeah. But I do use those words for the sake of conversation because everybody uses them. But I think if you actually explore what these words mean, I think you'll find that they don't actually make useful distinctions.
Okay, so like, do you believe the events in the Bible actually happened, or is it just like allegories and stories or whatever?
I mean,
Did Jesus do any miracles?
Yeah, provisionally. I mean, that's a provisional conclusion that I have, sure.
Okay, so when Jesus did things like turn water into wine or raise Lazarus from the dead, that kind of stuff, do you believe at that point in time he was obeying physical laws? Like there were physical laws that describe what happened?
Well, let me ask you a question. A little while ago, we thought we'd found evidence that another universe may have bumped up against our universe. Does that mean that other universe violated the laws of our universe? Does
Yeah,
that mean it was supernatural?
There's no constraints that other universes would have to have the same physical laws that ours do.
Sorry, that was a little. I think I didn't hear you quite.
There's nothing that would constrain other universes from having to obey the same physical laws that our universe obeys.
I don't really understand.
Okay, so in our
point.
universe, like gravity is attractive, right? Like masses pull themselves together.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that constrains another universe from gravity being repulsive. So other universes could have their own physical laws.
Yeah, but I'm just describing a situation where something external to our universe influences our universe. So does that mean that external influence contradicted natural law or broke natural law?
What are you two weirdos talking about?
We got on the subject of miracles because we got on the subject of supernatural versus natural.
Yeah, okay, I understand your distinction now. Yeah, well, I could easily define that. I could define supernatural as any intervention of another universe outside of ours, which causes the supersedence of our physical laws based on the physical laws in another universe.
Right, but
Ooh,
then
say it
you
slowly.
see that could. We actually thought that happened not long ago.
Hold on one second.
So now what you're saying is that the supernatural is within the purview of science.
Yeah, under that definition.
Yeah. Okay. So then, yeah. So most people that I talk to would apply that inconsistently. They would say, since God exists outside of the universe, he's supernatural. Yet the multiverse is not supernatural, even though that exists outside the universe. But it sounds like you're being more consistent with it.
That's because I'm awesome.
Yeah, that's why I like you, Cliff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is that I can operate under any definition of these things that you like, because I don't think that the terms generally are make real distinction.
I can understand what you're saying now. Yeah.
Hey, gang. Do you guys mind if I make it about me again?
Go for it.
So I got two. I guess I got a bunch of questions in terms of hangoutage. What do you guys think of this whole idea? Atheism for Realsies, I think I'll call it. I think that will sound interesting. You guys like the idea of someone at least trying to present the more I don't want to say sophisticated because that sounds kind of stupid. The more legit the more legit atheistic arguments, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I hear a lot of bad arguments, so I think that would be good. I haven't heard any from you, though, Joe, just to be clear.
There are a few bad arguments that I thought were persuasive. I recently explained why I think what's called the argument from divine lies is a bad argument. I can go into that. That would be an interesting hangout topic too. An argument, or the arguments atheists need to stop doing. And
I think what would be really interesting is for each sort of hangout, you got a blog or something, right?
yeah.
Yeah, you could do like a little summary of it, and sort of the discussion points of contention that were brought up, and that they could be referenced later on, because it'd be kind of interesting to see if positions have adapted. Like the argument that Brandon brought up against the mind-body problem, and he had a couple of ways that he would go and you could even go like offshoots of that. But it would be kind of interesting to see, especially as more people got involved in it. Could you get an evolution of ideas? Like one of the things people complain about, you'll see them like they'll come on G Plus and be like, a year ago people had the same stupid argument that nobody's gotten anywhere. But I mean, if actually intelligent people are having rational conversation, you would assume some learning is going on. So it'd be
Yeah.
kind of interesting, like just in like point note form, some of the points that were brought up to points of contention to actually see if there's any, sort of movement on them.
Yeah, I have been using. Can you guys? Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I have been taking notes, but on my Surface Pro. Maybe, I don't know. I don't say anything bad on here, but my whatchamacallit. My handwriting might not be so good, but I could always post it find a way to post like what you say online and everything. But yeah, that's always fun, like meeting minutes type things, because again, I'm doing this also. I'm doing this because of what Cliff said. In order to run these arguments and see the parts I need to get better at, or see the parts that that might be where the argument will ultimately lead to.
Until eventually you become a theist.
That too, I suppose. No.
M freaked out at me the other night because he thought I was going to become a Christian. He was like, "Cliff, I really worry about you sometimes," and he was going. That was pretty funny.
I thought he was. I thought he must be leading So Real on, because So Real the other day, him and M, they sounded like So Real's like, yeah, it's sounding a bit more persuasive, but it might just be M.
But if I was arguing against a mind-body problem, I think one of the ways I would hit it, which is what Brandon did, I'd run an ID-type argument. I'd run a strong counter-argument that we do need consciousness in order to explain things. I'd force you to attack that route, because the reason why I would is because it's one of the most non-trivial arguments to deal with. I mean, there are people who do entire PhDs in it. So you can throw out a lot of stuff really quickly and bog someone. Like, as a debating tactic, it's an extremely strong one. You have to know how to deal with the ID problem in some kind of succinct manner, because it is going to be thrown against you by anyone half credible.
Yeah.
Or not credible at all, like me.
Yeah.
No, you know it. I think from what Cliff has told me, you know the ID argument's a lot betterly than the other people.
A lot more betterly.
A lot more legitly and for realsies. I think those are two statements that are going to be used a lot on this hangout.
I'm not gonna lie, I am disappointed that more theists aren't as familiar with the intelligent design arguments.
They're all worried about the Calvinist.
Who is
now?
Yeah. The Calvinist threat. Yeah, most of it, they're really into the information intelligent design arguments. I think they would be. I mean, you're more, I think, where legit intelligent design wants to go, in that I mean, you accept the ages of the Earth. You're a lot of different a lot of things that less sophisticated people would associate with evolution. You understand are they're pretty concrete. You're interested in the types of intelligent design or design arguments that I know Cliff's interested in, and who else? But not. But I'm gonna have to look into them. I know that
they're going to be called against you, guaranteed.
All right. What about okay? So yeah, I think that I can always, like, one of the first things I mentioned in the next hangout is I can link to my recap and it would be cool to have like a whole bunch of links and like you said, everything bullet pointed, and uh, I think that might be insightful as well, because I didn't just come up with this in my head. I copied it from a bunch of people. And what else? It would be cool because I think maybe people will actually go to my blog, and people can suggest more topics, and I can decide if I'll deign to such pedestrian topics, or if I have to like look them up or anything. Like the ID argument, I need to look that up again.
Yeah, I think ID like really took a big hit at the Dover trial for a number of reasons. One really interesting thing was they called in a bunch of heavy hitters who wouldn't actually come in and testify, which looked really bad for the ID side. And some of the rulings was really kind of harsh. And it's really not very common to find strong ID proponents after that. And the most that you get um, in G plus is really low level stuff, like people saying just like sort of buzz jargony type words without really trying to understand what's going on. Most of the stuff is arguing against other things, like strictly anti-evolution, like attacking the actual science rather than trying to propose ID. Now the big dudes are still in it, like Behe and
Meyer.
those, right? Yeah, they're still there, but I mean they took a big hit when they didn't come out really strongly at that, and it didn't dominate.
I don't know if I agree with that. I
mean,
there was a Google. You can search Google for the term intelligent design, and since the Dover trial, it's like a hockey stick. It has just completely spiked since the early 2000s, the appearances of that term in published books.
You know what? I think I have to agree with that, because I actually didn't learn about. I didn't even know what intelligent design was until 2006, when my physical anthro professor, who was just that guy's a douche, but he was really against intelligent design, and he's all like, "Here we're going to talk about evolution, not intelligent design." And like, I didn't even know what he was talking. I'm like, we're not going to talk about things that we're not going to talk about. I don't know. Really comfortable chairs. I don't get it. But and then you know, and then it was a whole nother year before I got into skepticism, and then eventually into atheism. But that's another story. Anyways, yeah, that is true. But it seems like they might have gotten some awareness, but it was a heavy blow. It would
Yeah, but in what
trial. I'm sorry.
In what sense is it a heavy blow? They never wanted to teach intelligent design. The proponents of intelligent design. It was young Earth creationists who were trying to push intelligent design and kind of put the ID people in a awkward position.
But that's the whole. I mean, intelligent design proponents were too preoccupied with the the tent. They didn't want to. You have I guess the more serious people like Dembski and Behe and Myers. Is it Meyer or Myers?
I think it's Meyer, no S.
Meyer. You have those people who say what you said. Also, like Stephen Fuller, who's a proponent of it, but they didn't want to. I mean, they had bedfellows that they didn't want to offend, so they were much more meek about things like the younger creationism, and so that allowed for people in Dover, Pennsylvania, who were like, we need to find something that's creationism, that's Christian. Intelligent design, that's what they're calling it now. Let's go get that stuff. Let's set that up. And because Discovery Institute's a think tank, they're using They're using political means in order to get the clout for their theory. They're like, yeah, here, you want more information on us, without first going, wait, should we be giving this to people because these people because it's clear that they don't want evolution taught in high school, or was it middle school? It was high school.
That's the opposite of what ID proponents say, though.
Well, no. Well, the thing is, this is an example is when several times when Kenneth Miller debated this one ID proponent, I think it's Nelson, something Nelson.
Paul Nelson.
Paul Nelson, he was like very tacit about how old he thought the Earth was, and he tried to play it off as Ken Miller trying to shame him for his personal religious convictions. But Ken Miller, when he finally got it out, he said, "No, that's a scientific question. That question is important if you're going to try and explain when the designers decided to work, what's the temporal situation that your designer works on. It's important to know how old it is, but rather it seems that they're so like wishy-washy on what should be. This is how old we think the Earth is. This is how old, and that's how it is.
No.
In order to let everyone who's against evolution come together and
That sounds like you're saying in order to make an argument for ID, you gotta tell us how old you think the Earth is.
I think so. I think that's important.
No, I don't think so at all. That's irrelevant. There are ID proponents who are young Earth creationists. There are ID proponents who are old Earth, who believe in an old Earth. There are ID proponents who believe in Darwinian evolution and universal common descent. And there are those who don't.
No, I understand what you're saying, but
it makes no difference to the inference to design what you think about the age of the Earth. It's, do you find effects that we can correlate to conscious mind?
If you're going to talk about abiogenesis or things that should be conflicting with origins of consciousness in general, or origins of life in general, I think the age of the Earth is important, because the age of the Earth also, I mean, ancient Earth correlates with specific environmental features that we don't see today, and you're going to have to talk about the ancient Earth. And the ancient Earth was a lot different, which means that there are a lot of different parameters you have to consider, and it's a whole nother mess that the intelligent designer has to work with, or that.
See, this is a common problem.
Like I said, I hate these arguments. So, like, whatever I'm saying is at least 5 years old.
Well, yeah, I was actually gonna say I hear this kind of argument a lot. Where somebody will construct an argument to design, they will correlate the effects with the cause, which is mind, and then the skeptic will say, but you didn't explain X, Y, Z, though. And in a backwards kind of way, this is a violation of parsimony. It's unnecessary to know the age of the Earth in order to correlate the effects with the cause. No, and so what's happening is that you're requiring
I think I see where the mistake is.
You're requiring that the explanation be more complex than necessary to correlate.
No. I'm not requiring that intelligent design has to account for the age of the Earth. I'm saying that the age of the Earth is something that intelligent design should consistently acknowledge, in order to, because it's going to have to address things that occur in ancient time. It's not that intelligent design has to account for the age of the Earth. I agree with you there. But intelligent design, evolution and
And to be
evolutionary,
consistent with them.
yeah, evolution can be used hundreds of millions of years ago. It can be used now, whereas there are, like you said, there are intelligent design advocates who just can't use intelligent design 16,000 years after, not 16,000, I haven't slept in a while. Intelligent design stops working for some intelligent design proponents after 6,000 years, whereas for others it does work for millions of years. I,
Well, but
yeah,
even a young Earth creationist can say, whenever abiogenesis occurred, it must have been designed. I mean, even the young Earth creationist doesn't have to.
but a
They can
flat Earth
grant for the
theorist can
sake of.
even say that uh, the sun is, exist above, like several exist above our Earth, and there are stars in the sky. The flat Earth theorist is still wrong on a lot of other things. It still can't account for a lot of other things, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about what's relevant to the argument to design, though.
Well, I'm giving you an example. They can't, like a young Earth creationist can still explain things, but if he's going to use design, but
Like, just to give an example of, I think, what Joe might be saying, he has an argument about evolution of elephants based on some dates given by creationist literature. Now, they claim intelligent design or special creation of an elephant kind, and then they give dates which are not consistent with what we know about natural law and the evolution of elephants. So they're running into a problem when they're trying to make intelligent design compatible with observations that we know. And they're having to distort more and more of what we know to make intelligent design fit with observations that we directly have. I think that's the problem, maybe, that he's arguing that they're running into.
oh, see, I got super excited because someone recently tried to address the elephant argument that I brought up um, in the NEF debate that I had, and I wrote out a response to him because for some reason I haven't been getting my responses, or the comments on my videos haven't been showing up. I haven't been getting like notifications for them. So he wrote like something like a response to my elephant argument with citations and talking about what is it? Talking about gene differentiation and all this stuff. And I never responded to him for 5 days, and the only way I found out that he like contacted me was when he said, "So I guess my arguments stand. You're not going to answer them." And I told him I
Good
would.
Lord.
Yeah, I told him I would. Yeah, seriously, Google making me look like a flake. I told him I would respond to him and try to do it by this morning, but then I tried to figure out, but then I started talking about physical minds. Um,
Yeah, I'm starting to like Hangouts better than having to type up everything all the time. It just seems more efficient.
well, like from what I'm hearing, from what I'm getting when I explain certain things to Cliff through text, I'm apparently more coherent when I type things out. Like he got,
I think I definitely am too.
which sucks because I agree with you. I mean, that's why I sought out
It just
this.
feels like you get so much more done in a Hangout.
Yeah. Or things that take a long time when you're typing. Uh, or things that would take a long time to explain when you're typing just get dismissed like that when you're in a hangout. Sometimes having just a consensus, no, you don't explain that. That's stupid. Sometimes that really does help a lot. Okay, since it's my hangout, I can talk about this guy's argument if you want.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'd just
have
like
to
to
go
address
pretty
just
soon.
one
So.
point Brandon made. I'm not sure I agree with you that intelligent design advocates, the really big ones, never advocated teaching of it. Stephen Meyer, who's one of arguably the top three, always has consistently. He even authored large sections of the teacher's notes for Pandas and People, and he was one of the co-authors of the Wedge document, which strongly advocates teaching of intelligent design as sort of a necessary approach to understanding fundamental features of the world. So I don't really think I agree with the fact that they weren't advocating teaching.
Well, I mean, they don't advocate teaching it currently. I mean, that might be
Because it's
something for the long
unconstitutional.
term, like way down the road. But right now, what they've been focusing on is the higher levels of academia, peer-reviewed literature, and that kind of thing, and research.
I don't know, like Pandas and People was a textbook, and he, like I said,
Well, yeah,
co-authored
but
large amounts
it's a
of it.
question of in public schools, though. They make the
Right.
materials available for whoever wants to use it. But he did actually. Stephen Meyer is a good example because he refused to testify at Dover precisely because he did not think that intelligent design should be taught in schools.
I think that's why Nelson said the same thing, right? That's why he didn't testify there either.
I think you might be right, but I'm not sure.
I fully admit that I'm likely biased on this. I think they're lying. I don't think that's why they didn't testify. I think they knew the outcome of that trial, and they
I
well,
didn't
think that
testify for
you
that.
know, that's a
But it's
cognitive
complete
distortion
conjecture. I'll
called
openly admit it.
mind reading.
I don't think so for Nelson. Meyer, I think, Meyer, I think actually, if he worked on a few things, he's actually a very good debater.
Oh yeah, I think so.
I think that he's good at holding his own. For example, he was in like an interview, and the talk show host was, well, Stephen Meyer, he was making the case that, and Stephen Meyer immediately was like, well, actually, how about you let me make the case again? And for one thing, I love it when the radio show host isn't just reiterating what was said 30 seconds ago, as if he's the only communicator to the other person, as if the other person wasn't listening at all. But also, when a radio show host does that, they always mess it up. And so it was nice that Meyer was just ready to go, going, no, I'm going to say it for myself. Step aside. He gets a little bit too whiny, I think, for some things.
The problem I had is basically that trial made a very strong statement that intelligent design is not science. That came out really strongly in that trial. So if I was an intelligent design advocate, if I believed intelligent design was science, you couldn't have kept me away from that trial. Like, I would have begged to get on trial to defend that. And it would boggle me that somebody would, because I would have said, okay, look, I'm just here to defend the fact that ID is science. If my position is it's not founded enough to teach, I don't know why. I don't understand why you would say it is science but shouldn't be taught. I don't understand that position at all. But
No,
if
I can understand that, by the way.
why would you possibly say it shouldn't be taught?
Well, there's usually the case is that when you're teaching something, you're teaching the core. But if there's something that's fringe, you don't necessarily want to have that taught, especially at the high school level. And I could see that actually makes sense. If it like something like string theory isn't going to be taught, or
well, and that's the way they view it, is a developing theory. And
sure.
Steve Meyer specifically said that they're focusing on the
science
higher.
at all levels, from junior high to high school to college, and I've always introduced speculative theories or speculative hypotheses. Been very clear to state this is what they were. But for example, even when you introduce something as basic as Newtonian gravity, and you tell them what Newtonian gravity is and the history of it, and then you just give a 5-minute, like, sort of brief discussion about, like, there are other theories that explain this, and there's some very speculative ideas that we don't know very much about, trying to explain some very large problems that we don't have. You at least introduce it to show these people the fundamental great problems that very brilliant people are struggling with. Like, science is a struggle, it's a fight. And you can't make students think that it's such a simple thing that we have all this shit worked out, because we really don't.
Oh yeah,
Well,
language. Maybe
until you
keeping it PG, I decided. By the way, none of your foul mouth, Cliff. But also, you know what? That's a good thing to interrupt. No design. No. This is about no design. Although as soon as we started talking about it, we went from 0 views to 3 views. I feel like
infinite
we increased by 300%.
Yeah, we increased quite a bit. But no. Part of this is also to improve my debating skills. What do I need to work on? What am I doing?
Changing subjects.
No, seriously, I have been like Gary D told me that in the middle of a sentence I'll bring up something and it will sound like I am changing subjects or I'm talking about a new thing.
No, I mean, I was joking. I actually think you're pretty focused. But I will review the video and tell you all the problems that I can find.
Awesome. I need to do that. The other thing I forgot to do is I do the a lot.
You do.
But I say I mean so much, and I also say or I mean. I forgot to have. I think that everyone who does come in, I think I have to charge them with the they have to. They have to do something every time I say I mean.
You know what? There's actually a Hangout app with like sound effects.
I should. Okay.
And every time you say it, I can do the like buzzer sound effect.
I mean, maybe that would work, but I mean, I don't think it's gonna work because right now, it's not even working. So, and that sounds like I get money. Anything? I want to say that sounds like I should go get the pizza. I think it should be. It needs to be like or something. No, that means I'm funny.
Nah.
I forgot about a joke I made up that isn't that. It's a good switcheroo joke. But it's really bad. What is it? I used to think that one time I was. That's a joke. It was a partner joke. I say something stupid and we play a gong. No design for now. I need to stop saying I mean. And I need to prepare a bit more every time I talk. What else? And yeah, I'm not going to do the argument from scale. It's just going to be my 3 args. I need to look into how to address near-death experiences. I actually didn't think I needed to know too much about those because I didn't find them persuasive, but it's clear that smart people find them persuasive. Hey, OG, did you get my message first? You're not going to go, no, I didn't get your message, and I just wanted to come into your room and say I hate you, right? I'm joking. I'm going to broadcast you now.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else should I work on?
Should I watch a video or something first? I thought I had a link to like a video or something.
No.
Yeah, I think that's the way the invites can come out sometimes. Like
Um,
sometimes you get an invite and you click on it and it just takes you to this video playing. Like it's not an actual link to go into the Hangout.
Yeah, you have to manually provide that link.
Yeah, I put that in, and it's such a gross-looking link too.
I know, it's awful.
Again, I think all my hangouts are going to end up being, at least part of it is going to be me complaining about Google dropping the ball with Google Hangouts.
Yeah, and their new version of Hangouts is like it has 0 features.
Like I said, I'm new to
terrible.
this. The Google Hangout historian Ocean, he described a version of it that seemed it sounded kind of cool. But I forgot it, so I guess it wasn't that cool. I have a clicker so I can count how many times. That was another topic I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about, I guess, my dialogue with Matt Slick on the Bible Thumping Wingnut show, which, like I said, like when I went on to talk to Matt Slick, I wanted to run the argument from divine hiddenness because I think it still can conquer Calvinism. But I wasn't sure how Calvinisty Matt Slick is. He certainly is, but
Oh, yeah.
he does. I mean, yeah, no doubt. But a lot of evidential stuff comes up in stuff I've seen him talk about. But
Yeah,
also,
Calvinists are not necessarily pre-suppers, although a lot of them are.
yeah. So I wanted to see if it worked, and then he brought up. Uh, he stated, no, not even what are the, is that, was that a beeping to let me know that I said I'm muted?
No,
That wasn't me that time.
Okay. Uh,
It was Cliff.
I see. Anyway, yeah, he said that not even the elect want to get into a relationship with God. And that threw me. I'm like,
Man.
I imagine these elect people
Calvinism.
being like these people. They would be the people who want to get into a
I've
relationship
been
with God.
actively ignoring Calvinism for the past decade, and here you are bringing it back into my.
He brought up the Esau and Jacob, right? Esau and Jacob example.
Oh yeah.
So I
That's
was like,
one of their quote-unquote proof scriptures is Romans 9 with Jacob and Esau. Yep.
yeah. So I immediately was like, yeah, he doesn't like Esau because of what you brought up. Anyways, so I was thinking, so wait, wouldn't the elect want to? And he mentioned, well, the elect want to once God like shoves the Holy Spirit into them, and that reminded me of the sensus divinitatis, sensus divinitatis argument, which can be countered by what's called the demographics of theism. And pretty much, so first I asked him, hey, so these are chosen by God, and they're chosen in an order. God chooses them purposely. He has a rhyme and a structure to who he chooses to be elect. And both Matt and I forget the other guy. And I feel bad because they were both actually very nice to me. But I wanted to Andrew, I think.
Okay.
Tim wasn't there, I believe. I think I also got lucky in that. Most of the wingnuts were, I guess, missing in action for whatever reason. Anyways, they both were like, yeah, God would choose the elect with a purpose, and so I said, if it is the case that the elect are decided upon in a pattern, then wouldn't we be able to see that pattern across the globe? Instead, what we have are the demographics of theism, which it has a whole bunch of theists living in, say, Turkey. 98% of the people in Turkey are Muslim, whereas 96% of the people in Cambodia are not theist. It seems like this lopsided, uneven distribution of theistic belief doesn't match up with an orderly system of picking the elect versus who are not the elect. And immediately they were like, well, you're assuming that God would be orderly. And the thing is, like, I was like, wait, didn't you guys both kind of went, yeah, of course God would be orderly to me like 30 seconds ago? And I think it was just too soon for even their memories. And Matt kind of realized that's what he
Yeah,
said.
that was a really strong counter.
Yeah, it was like it. The thing is, the demographics of theism, it doesn't sound like it should be. It's okay. Sometimes theism is weird around the world. God moves in mysterious ways, so screw you. But I mean, the thing is, the God that's being posited, he is being posited with having reasons for why he moves in mysterious ways. And so these reasons kind of, I mean, there has to be a method to this madness. Um, the purpose is very important to the theistic depiction of God. So we should be able to see this purpose for his creatures, like us. We should be this. I think that this purpose should be um, evident in the patterns of theistic belief across the world. In an earlier hangout, we were talking about this with Shamos, and I was saying to Shamos, I'm actually sincere with this. It would be really cool if we could discern patterns of some deity's purpose in the distribution of theistic belief around the world. Like, for example, one of the counter arguments for to divine hiddenness is that you need non-resistant non-believers for the believers to work on, to get them into the legitimate mental state to actually come to know God. But if that were true, the demographics of theism would be, like in a country with a whole bunch of non-theists, there would be a small subset of theists, and over time, you would see just the theists becoming bigger and bigger, more and more important. There's two Brandons. There's two theists.
Yeah, I
Anyways.
just had to get your attention because I've got to get going.
Oh, really? That's how you got my attention?
Yeah. Actually, I was logging in from my computer that has a keyboard hooked up so that I could
Oh,
type
I
it
see.
in the side chat, but then you
Yeah,
said my name, so I decided to talk.
yeah. But like, do you see? Well, I guess take care. I can talk about this another time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I'd like
Yeah.
to talk to you about sometime about ID, Brandon, if you ever had a moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not in this room.
absolutely. I've got a couple. It was relevant, though. It was relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas of specific questions we can build a hangout around
Cool.
sometime, so definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Brandon, favorite ID proponent.
Alright, take care, everybody. Thanks for letting me in.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Anytime. The more theists, the merrier.
Cool.
Yeah.
Alright, good night, guys.
Take care.
Hey, just respectfully for a second, can I speak for a moment to you?
No, totally. Go
Um,
ahead. Go ahead. Well,
oh,
wait.
awesome.
Is it a personal thing? Because this is like a
Well,
hangout
it
thing.
is a little bit of a matter maybe of decorum, but I want to try to express it. I intend to be polite with you, that our beliefs are
Would
probably
you
not
mind
that far
if
apart.
it's like drama though? Not. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Oh,
no
it's not
yucky
drama.
stuff. But yeah, my beliefs are. I might have given the impression that I'm a theist, but I don't know quite where I am. I'm a skeptic. Oh, I thought you were talking about me. But
No.
okay, I know. Okay, the only little bit of drama is if I have dissed you or talked over you, I am willfully and completely ignorant. I'm really brand new to all of this format, this YouTube G plus format. So in terms of a venue, and so if I've made any gaffes or lapses of judgment, I apologize for that just up front. That's where the drama can end, if you like, and
Okay.
I'll
Cool. All right.
silence out and listen.
No, you could talk more. Yeah. Actually, I don't want my hangouts to end up being like 8 hours long. Like I think at the most 2.5. But yeah, so the argument I ran tonight was the argument from physical minds. Obviously, what I mentioned earlier is that uh, it's a lot more compelling, I think, if it's given with a couple other naturalistic arguments, which is unfortunate. So, I mean, um, I just don't know what to do about it if I'm going to give it in a case against the existence of God with other arguments that aren't necessarily, cases for naturalism. I think I'm going to have to shift some things around. But um, I'm glad I know that there are some arguments I need to look out for. Like I wouldn't prepare for out of body or near death experiences, and I'm bummed that I have to look into design arguments, but I think I know a few people who are interested in those arguments. I need to say I mean less, and what
I think
else?
it's relatively clear one of the things that absolutely has to be focused on, that this is a probabilistic argument. Because it didn't seem like that was clear like right away, and there's a bit of a struggle to make sure this connection. And I think like if someone's running the evidential problem of evil, like they will clarify that right away. I am not saying that God cannot do this, right? I'm just
Yeah.
saying this seems more likely, or there's no reason to think that God is constrained to do this. That's why I tried to run the red house painter guy. I think that that's a very clear example of what the argument is trying to say.
Draper. Did you see the Paul Draper debate with William Lane Craig?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Paul Draper. Both Max and I were talking about Paul Draper doing it. Paul Draper did. He probably gave the most legitimate case against theism in a debate against Craig, um, in that he presented like a positive case for naturalism. But like I said to Max, Paul Draper, he did it in a very kind of weak way. Like I said, he came at it as an agnostic, and he even said that there were that theism. He even started like saying some parts of his own case that definitely don't make that much sense on theism. And I know William Lane Craig prepares so much for these debates. He knew that Paul Draper was an agnostic. He knew. He knew. So when he kept on saying atheist Paul Draper, atheist Paul Draper, and then he knew that Paul Draper would go up and go, I'm actually an agnostic, because he knew. He knew. He knew. Anyways, but Paul Draper, he's the one who, his thing is that if you're picking from two jars with jelly beans in them, it's kind of the same format of an argument that you gave with the red houses.
Yeah.
Only his took a little bit longer to explain, whereas the red houses you got out like that. And the thing is Jeffrey J. Lauder loves that jelly bean example, but Draper only uses it in the first 5 minutes of his opening speech, and then he never really brings up the jelly bean. He doesn't like. If this is how you're gonna present your case, you gotta have it like throughout. You gotta go with it. Have like, and so this jelly bean. So in conclusion, I'm gonna eat this last jelly bean or something. It even kind of threw off William Lane Craig, because in his rebuttal period he tried to go with the jelly bean thing, and but it never was brought up again throughout the rest of the debate. But Lauder loved that example, but he did the same thing. He only mentioned jelly beans in his opening, and then he doesn't talk about like, let's look at all my jelly beans. And I don't know, if you're gonna go with it, you go with it full on. You don't just whatever.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments I would make if I was trying to run that is that I don't think that they're being consistent because this is not how they think about anything else that's not divine. They seem to be using a different type of logic when they're making divine inferences, when they're making other inferences. Because right away, Brandon would admit, of course, the dude who paints red houses. But why do you not make the same inference?
Yeah.
What's going on, right?
I mean, he's yeah, whatever. Yeah, I wrote down red houses and then I got all excited because I'm like, oh, this is being recorded. I have it forever. Um, but yeah, because I'm only using this argument, the argument from physical minds, and the other two arguments, uh, I've decided to sneak in a little bit of theism being a lame explanatory model in the way, but maybe focusing on a couple things that Sean Carroll pointed out. Um, because I've noticed this too. Theism seems poorly defined. Um, I had to make sure, I felt that I needed to make sure I defined what theism was for this hangout. Uh, and one of my favorite theists, Brandon, has a definition of God, of theism, that I feel is incomplete. And it changes from people within Christianity, and it changes from people amongst different theists. And so I think maybe going with Sean Carroll's argument that theism is poorly defined, and then explaining how that makes it not a great explanatory model compared to something like naturalism or just a non-theistic view of the world. I think that can be said in like a lot fewer words than defining what naturalism is and making sure I make it explicitly related to atheism, like I
Yeah,
did
I liked
with
how you brought
Max.
it up when you were talking to Pillbox the same way. Very same sort of point, right? Like, okay, you have some kind of idea, but you can't explain to me what the idea is. And even the people who somehow think this idea is true can't even agree what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, how you and G-Man can laugh at people saying that dinosaurs are related to birds today, but uh, most of paleontology doesn't laugh at that, or maybe they laugh
You can
because
at least
birds
say
are.
what a bird is.
I mean, yeah, uh, and also you two are doing the rounds on Google Hangouts. I mean, I always felt like I couldn't say that argument to people, but just the way they were laughing at stuff like that, it made me look. The people who matter, they already know that evolution works. The people who sign the checks, the people who get things done, the people who are interested in finding out more things about our universe and finding out more things about uh, nature and our surroundings, they already know that evolution is the way to go.
I kind of agree with that argument, but there's a massive rebuttal to that argument, right?
What's
And
up? Go ahead.
the massive rebuttal is many, many times in our understanding of mathematics and physics, people came out of absolutely nowhere to say what you know is wrong or what you know is horribly incomplete. And they were not people that had any kind of standing in the community at the time. I mean, the most famous of these is Einstein, who worked as a patent clerk, who completely revolutionized physics. So, now I'm not saying Einstein was pillbox, by any stretch of the imagination.
Like he went to a good
Oh yeah.
institute. There's like a quote of him saying, "I don't like this whole I was just some guy dicking around in a patent office who was like, oh, relativity. I went to school. I learned all this stuff." No, that's not how. I think there's like a quote of him kind of getting a little annoyed with that. How
But
come everyone's coming in when I want to end a hangout? Hey Remy, hey Ask an Atheist. Oh, see, I don't want to interrupt in order to make sure I don't think I'll do that. Um, hey, how's it going? But yeah, you're right. But no, I agree with you. I don't
like
know if
on a
yeah.
basic level, I think you have to be very careful of saying even that you need to go to a good school in order to challenge an idea. I
No,
think
yeah.
that you have to be really like it's second nature. Like if you've studied something and you've put a lot of work into it, you realize the struggle that it takes to really try to understand something. Like unless it's very few things are intuitive, and even things that you know that you like that come easy to you. It's not like anyone just sits down and makes this stuff up. It takes a while to learn it, to understand it, to be able to apply it. And when you see someone who's done absolutely nothing and yet seems to think what you're saying is wrong because intuitively it just doesn't seem to make sense to them,
Hmm.
that's a little bit on the extreme side of crazy. Because there has never been anyone in the history of the world, as far as we know, who intuitively could understand these things. Like, no one was walking around 5 years old and was just like, oh yeah, calculus, what's up with that? Nobody has come to these things. Like, even the smartest people that we know of took quite a long time to figure these things out. So for someone like Pillbox to say, like, oh yeah, like Newton, like on my worst day, like stone cold drunk, I'm like levels above that dude. That's the sort of argument that they're sort of claiming when they're saying, I don't need to study. I don't need to actually work any of this out. I can just think about it, and I know that what you're saying is wrong. That's kind of an absurd claim. Like I can see where you're coming from.
It I mean, and I agree with you. I think it's yeah. I mean, still those people came out of nowhere, but they knew. But I imagine it being more like if Neff took your offer to allow to write something and to publish it in your name. I think that that's the difference. I think that that's kind of a different thing. If Neff really thought that he had a case, and I mean not if he believed in himself, but if he's to be compared to these people who like just like stormed into a physics conference and was like, "Look what I thought of when I was stamping some patents, mofo's. Throw down." I I don't I don't know.
That's the problem with that. And like, I mean, look, even if you like Nephilim's greatest case could be made if he wrote that paper, gave it to me, I submitted it, and it was a brilliant work, and they rejected it. Done. He'd have his proof. He could put that up on his page. He could say, "Look at my paper. It's scientifically literate. I've done all the citations. I've made, a coherent argument," and they rejected it simply because I said evolution was false. They never counteracted any of my claims. So the greatest thing that could happen to Nephilim was for his paper to refuse to be published on those grounds. Like his case to be over, done. He could champion himself. Like
It
so, if I
does
was him, it's a
it does
win-win.
yeah, it does kind of sound like win-win. I mean, if he gets published, it's like yeah,
Bam.
either um hmm. I'm trying to figure out. No one wants to talk about mind-brain dependency. What I looked up for a couple hours before. It's all about design, cosmology, and young Earth creationism. The bummer is that it does seem like Brandon gets a little bit more. He gets a little bit more Yes, we do have a syllabus, and you're supposed to print it out yourself. Remy, no, I didn't mean leave, Remy. I'm fine with you talking. I need to work on my bedside manner.
Yes,
Ask an,
Doctor. No.
ask an atheist. I've never been in a room with you before. I remember I tried having a hangout, and I labeled it Ask an Atheist, but I saw your name, and I'm like, I don't want to step on his toes. I don't want to.
No, I don't care.
I could barely hear you.
It's all good. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. How's it going? Remy, you're back.
Get my headphones plugged in, and that should be better. That should be better right now.
All right, cool.
Or not.
No, you're a little bit better.
Okay, let me just reset stuff.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can hear you. Yeah. Are you wearing your huge blue
No,
things,
just
Remy?
my little headphones, like my phone. Hello, doggy.
Oh. Look at Remy. I want to broadcast him. I have the power. He has like these huge headphones that look just like awesome. They're just. He has to have his windows closed because it would distract the helicopter pilots, I think, right?
So I would just like to say that when it comes to debating Christians, if you really want to think you guys are having a one-up on them or of any sort, rather than just having an opinion against them, you look for someone who's actually become a Christian, who is actually involved with a PhD of any sort of school you're looking into.
Well, there's really no point, is there?
Neff never was. Pillbach never was. So I guarantee you, anybody else you talk to you mentioned in here, except for maybe what's her name? Anyways, the Scottish chick. Anyways,
How do I make it so I'm not presenting to you? And also, are you talking about what's her name? Are you? Hey, look, man. I would love to debate William Lane Craig, even though I think I would probably get my butt kicked.
And he's not a scientist, though. He's
But he knows a lot about cosmology. I mean, that was
he knows shit. He knows nothing.
He knows a lot about it, but he doesn't present the most.
He's one of these guys who starts an hour or whatever his lecture goes on with, if the Christian God is true, then yada 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 yada. Mm-hmm. That's the way he starts. So what kind of a stupid debate is that? I mean, I can start everything as well. If the spaghetti monster is true, then I can make up anything I like and make a debate about it.
Mm-hmm. Like, I appreciate sometimes when Pillbox comes into a room and supports something, but I started having a separation from him because he's a flat earther. That completely throws most credibility out the window.
Uh-huh.
I think,
and he knows it. But his only claim is, I've talked to pilots. And so when I was curious, are you talking about brains and minds correlation or something else?
Yeah, the whole point of this hangout is there's been kind of a dearth of the more current, what I think are substantial arguments against theism or for atheism in the hangouts that I've been in. And I found when I've tried to talk about these, I mean, you are forever being broadcast. I don't know how to stop right there.
I tried myself too. There we go.
Okay. I find that there's a lot of, I have to cover a lot of background information first, whereas I'm ready to come in and start arguing about these things, but instead I come in and it's people saying, no, Darwin was an agnostic till his death. No, what else? No, knowledge can be learned through this. No, you can use inductive arguments. No, you have to. No, you can use inductive arguments. No, you can only use deductive arguments. And I'm like, but I've looked up all these different arguments that are specific to atheism and theism. I want to argue those. And I realize that sometimes when I bring them up, people don't even know what they are, or more prominent atheists have given arguments that go under the same labels, but have given really, really crappy renditions of those arguments. And so I decided, hey, I mean, I'm not the best at this. I'm not like some great speaker. I'm not all that articulate, but I know that there are these arguments out there. And so maybe at least somewhere when theists go, atheists, all they want to talk about is how awesome science is and how the Old Testament has atrocities in it. They can go, but there was this one kind of weird person who had a dumb mustache for a time. He has a few hangouts. Maybe we can look there and see what they really think are arguments against theism. So here we are. Also, since I want to do debates, I should be practicing my arguments against other people before I present them. That way I'm more prepared for my debates. And so one of the arguments is called the argument from physical minds. And it's the argument that the dependency of our minds on the physical brain, it makes more sense on atheism or a naturalistic perspective than it would on theism. And there's a lot more.
There's not really a problem with that, but they're overlooking the fact that, well, not exactly a fact, but the intellectual Christian acknowledges the physical first, the tangible first. And they recognize, yeah, you're right. But they also hold to a third option. It's not necessarily, meaning the unseen, the unknowable, that is the intangible, that which is incorporeal. Spiritual, if you want to actually get down to it.
Yeah, the argument. Yeah, well, this is the argument. It says that theism, if it's defined like I mentioned in the event, it's there exists a all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, loving, eternal, non-physical person who is the creator and sustainer of our universe, and we can call him God. If such a God exists, then we should expect to see certain things about our world around us. And two important things we should expect to see is that the mind survives the death of the brain, and this is because we have souls that can either go to an afterlife on theism and theistic claims, and because that's what God is. He's a disembodied mind. He has no link to any physical substrate, was the word that Brandon was using. So we should expect to see, when we perform science, we collect empirical evidence and everything, we should expect that to substantiate those two core tenets of theism. However, that's not what we see. And this is, dang it, I forgot to mention, it's really important to mention this is a probabilistic argument. This isn't saying that it's conclusive. Certainly what you just said, more thoughtful theologians, it's compatible, what's called interactionist dualism, that our minds are highly dependent on the physical brain. That is compatible with theism. No doubt about it. I agree with that. But it's a probabilistic argument, and it seems less likely on theism. The evidence that we see is less likely on theism, and the evidence, and it just so happens that the evidence we see is more likely if there was no God, or if it seems more likely on the processes that we can that we could postulate that also don't postulate the existence of a soul or a disembodied person out there.
Well, you can't have physical, tangible evidence from something that doesn't have a physical, natural form. If it's not manifest and based on within this universe of the natural physics, if a spirit does exist, but doesn't exist solely on the grounds of the laws of physics, as we have in this reality, but if a spirit does exist, philosophically, of course, then you can't actually demand evidence of something that doesn't exist within this universe, but exists. Period. So if this is this universe, not this galaxy, not this cosmos, but
Yeah.
the entirety of whatever contains all 200 trillion galaxies and whatever. If whatever contains that is only a bottle within another reality of sorts, and that reality is actually paramount and the cornerstone of this physical reality of law and laws that we hold dear to, that we can only experience, and you and me can only express and demonstrate and and testify. Oh yeah, I touched that, and we can see this happening in the cosmos today. Well, that's not excluding the fact that if this is a program within God, then you can everybody in existence could always say God doesn't exist. It doesn't completely remove him from the equation. It just simply removes himself from our illusion, our belief, our perspective. So if the best mankind can ever get to is 100% saying, well, we don't see him, we don't have proof of a God who can't exist solely within our universe, that a God actually saying that he doesn't exist within our universe because he had to create this universe. By the way, you have to create, if in order to create something, you have to be outside of it. Then you essentially both sides, atheism and any theism, not just Christianity, at the best comes to a philosophical standpoint.
You said a couple things.
Sorry, go ahead.
You said a couple things that I should probably that I disagree with. One of them is that the God of theism actually often, of the big three especially, interacts with our world. But also, I mean, you just said that we can't. I mean, there's no evidence of. I wasn't sure if you were saying we just can't have evidence of a soul, but we also can't. We just can't have evidence of anything that's like a disembodied mind. But theists claim that they do have evidence that such a disembodied mind does exist, and they call that disembodied God. So obviously there are expectations that theists claim they should see about the world, and they use that to demonstrate that the God that they believe in exists. So,
but the difference is I can't actually take said proof and prove it to you and demand that you accept it.
No, that's not.
Because at best you're in. It's up to you to decide. I can't. It's like it's like Hitler trying to convince you that Nazism is the correct race for the entire world. Well, that's his opinion, and he can't convince you without taking you to gunpoint. So if you want a theist to prove it to you, then you have to seek it. You can't have any theist saying, well, God exists because I witnessed someone 5 minutes later on their deathbed coming back to life. They would have to bring you to that moment in time to prove it to you. Otherwise, it's just that's what that theist took away from that. That's the best evidence or proof that people can come to, except for saying, well, look outside, you see the trees, you see the stones, you see the sky. So
I disagree. Like there's lots of different types of evidence that I think can be given for pointing to a God, and one of them is that if we looked at the interaction between the brain and our minds, we saw. In fact, I wrote down a couple when we were asking Brandon what something he felt could only be explained on theism, or what could not be explained on an atheistic worldview. And I think that, there are certain things that theism claims that if we do go and look around the world and we do find, I think that is persuasive evidence for theism. It would be persuasive evidence for theism. And it's not about proof with, like I said, it's a probabilistic argument.
Yeah.
This argument in particular shows that that theism is less likely that, given two key things about that are required or entailed by theism, than atheism, which doesn't have which doesn't posit those two claims and actually fits the evidence that we do happen to find. But you're right in that it's not like 100% proof either way. It's just makes a case for naturalism or a case for a non-theistic world more likely compared to a case for theism.
Like if God, like I believe he is, but I play with hypotheticals, and some Christians think I'm trying to avoid as if I'm actually a closet atheist, but I'm not. I'm just typing a hypothetical because I can't deny I'm an intellectual, although I'm not a college or university graduate of any sort. But if God did create this physical reality within its laws just for us, albeit there may be, whether you want to believe there's other, life forms or not, I don't. If God revealed himself absolutely to every person on earth at one point, and it's undeniable, not by, then that would actually force people to actually kill themselves and not want to be a part of it, or they would simply say, yeah, because I become a Christian or a Jew based on that I'm going to die otherwise. So guess why God doesn't force you to believe? Because he wants you to discover on your own, or with help from other people, to enforce or encourage what you already do believe or what you could believe, that God does exist. But if he doesn't exist, then there's no real point in the end if he doesn't exist to really debate about it.
Because there are people who do believe that he exists. Or am I talking over someone?
Nope.
It's because there are people who do think that he does exist, and because of that belief, they think that they can that they're justified in holding other views that they have that I find deplorable, or that they're trying to enforce on other people. Like someone like Commando, he's not trying to force his views on other people, so I don't have a problem with him holding his views, even though, like, actually I think they're really cool. So I don't have a problem with them because of that. But I mean, another person like Rose, she told me like just the coolest thing. I'm surprised I never heard of it before. She thinks that the comedian, one of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks, actually didn't die. Instead, what he did was, what happened is that the real Alex Jones died, and Bill Hicks took over Alex Jones's persona and got fat.
Oh, okay.
That's an actual conspiracy.
Yeah, it's called.
That's not hurting anyone. That's not like making. I don't know.
It's called parallel universe paradox.
No, anyways, that's the reason why I think that even though I don't think God exists, I'm still concerned about the question. But also, I think it's a good way for me to try to learn how to communicate complex issues to other people in a way that is persuasive, or in a way that makes me sound not like inarticulate idiot. But you mentioned a couple things that that I think go to arguments I've been looking into recently. You mentioned that the reason why God doesn't reveal himself to everyone at certain points is because it's because that would be kind of cheap. Or that's how I see the argument. It's saying it's not. I mean, if he just shows himself to everyone, people sometimes it might be the case that God wants us to earn it. You know, God He wants more sincere belief in him, right? if he just gives it out willy-willy, then it's not really a type of relationship that he's interested in having.
Well, he wants
And
black and white. He doesn't want a gray or a transition. He wants either or.
and you said that it's also for other theists to help those people, help these non-believers. There's a powerful argument called the demographics of theism. I mentioned it earlier, that I think kind of it shows that this kind of this hypothetical, which you did call it, it really when you try and tease it out into the actual world, it doesn't really, it seems completely divorced from the demographics of theistic belief, which are so uneven about the world. If what you said was the way that God wants us to come to know Him, wants us to come to a theistic belief, then we shouldn't see that countries like Turkey, 98% of people in Turkey are theists, whereas 96% of the people in Cambodia are not. Instead, what we should see is that when we look at certain countries and we look at them over time, we see that one country is mostly non-theist, but there's like a core set of theists. And over time, those core set of theists, more theists start replacing the non-theist, because people are coming to know God in the more sincere manner, and in the more black and white manner that you described. But that's not what we see. That's not the demographics that we see. We see whole countries are theists, whereas whole countries are not theists. And we see that the few people that are not theists in these countries that are theists, they're not interacting at all with the actual theists who share the country with them. So these contentions about God's goals about getting people to come to know Him, they don't seem substantiated when you look at the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
does that make sense?
Like one of the reasons why I learned that it's not that the person is not truly a believer in a God if they believe that if they believe solely on the premise that if they don't, they're going to be destroyed. If that's that's not a core belief. That's a core fear of the unknown.
But do you think that that's keeping people? Is that what's keeping all of 96% of Cambodia not as non-theist instead of theist though?
More circumstance, really.
Yeah, I mean, in fact,
that's
that's the turn in the argument. In fact, what we do see about the distribution of theistic belief around the world makes much more sense on just processes that don't involve a God that has purposes and intentions, and a plan for his human creatures.
One of the biggest failures of the church the Christian church, people who are not of the Christian faith have a criticism of the Christian faith, is that when you're outside of the Christian faith, you want to, even I can kind of relate, but outside, is that they want to be, they are often accused of being the source or the negligent source of the pain in the world because they're not out there helping anybody, or at least not enough where it counts. And so the reason why there's not enough Christians out there, and they're not growing as much as people would like to, and the suffering is not stopping, is because the church is not encouraging missionaries. Missionaries are supposed to start a church, make sure it's established, make sure it's it's able to sustain itself, and the missionary is supposed to leave and start another one. You barely see that in the world. You do see it, but if you look, but it's that's the reason why you get Cambodia or Switzerland or China or parts of China, is because either Christians are afraid to go there, or they don't or they're just being lazy, irresponsible, and they're not bothering.
So coming to know God is dependent on Christians actually spreading the word.
Well, no, it's in a sense, yes, yeah. I would have to say physically, yeah. It's our voluntary will to feel our excitement and feel our see a Christian going next door and saying, oh, like, oh my gosh, well, that's supposed to be the person's energy to go over to Cambodia and say and do that and have that energy saying, look what happened to me, look what happened, and this is what the Bible confirms. You don't see that though. Rather you see people going to their church and spreading it among people who already believe.
I think that the problem with that line of thinking is that there are forms of theism that agree with you and use that to strive even further. For example, Mormonism. I knew a lot in Long Beach, which is where I'm from. Long Beach has a huge population of Cambodian people, and many of them are Mormons because Mormon missionaries went to Cambodia after after Pol Pot and everything, and there was a lot of adoptions and everything. It seems like if this is the purpose that you think God is really gonna get people to come to know Him, it seems like the most likely form of theism would be Mormonism then, because they're the ones who are actually going out and doing it. They're the ones who have look, missionary, you're going to Cambodia, you're going to Rwanda. It seems like that's an argument to become a Mormon, right?
There are Christian missionaries out there,
but not enough,
just
though,
enough.
right?
There is probably a fraction of the Mormons as a demographic for the Christians out there as well.
I see. Well, wait a minute. You were saying that most of them are, but I mean, are you saying that the number of non-Mormons spreading, fulfilling the Great Commission, they're equal to the Mormons out there?
No, it's more or less that you have come to the point of receiving the knowledge that it's more of a dominant Mormon influence in the Eastern world rather than Christian, and that's what your point is. But I haven't heard that. So it depends on our circles and our networks and what we hear. And so if you actually, maybe you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong, but maybe there's actually neither are actually making an influence where they should.
Well, the issue is that you pointed out certain things that would point to that would mean that there were a set of believers in God who were doing what God desires us to do in order to spread the gospel message, and but it seems like Christians are failing to do that. And I just noted that, if anything, it seems like it's the Mormons who are actually, getting on ready to go, and that's where they're going with Cambodia. It seems like that would point to Mormonism being right, but it still wouldn't explain places like Scandinavia, all the places in Scandinavia who are non-theists, but I mean Scandinavia doesn't have the issues that maybe other countries that are rebounding from horrible regimes that murdered millions of people, millions of the members of their society. These places, I mean, I would like to go and visit Sweden or Norway. I don't know. I think Sweden. What's Norway known for? Sweden. I'll go to Sweden.
Actually, Norway is a pretty nice country.
I'm sure they're both awesome. I'm sure. I mean, that's the point, though, is that these places are full of non-theists. But yeah, OG he knows where I'm going with this. Swedish, I think of cute girls. That's why I would. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there is a proportionate amount of attractive women also in Norway. Oh, bye, Cliff.
Oh, hi, Cliff. I like Cliff. Can I jump
Yeah.
in just for a second here? And I
Please
speak
do.
with zero authority on any of the argument. I've been just simply learning in the last week how little I know about philosophy and all the different arguments that way. And so I've kind of had my pride broken as I've come to discover how little I know that way. But as far as missionary work, I have some experience. I was trained to be one for 3 years in my youth as a Catholic. And when it comes to nation conquering, they're pretty well renowned for it. But the way the Catholics, like St. Francis Xavier, and some of the Jesuits and Dominicans, who, by the way, made an attempt at establishing missions in Cambodia to no avail. What they would generally do is try to find a population. And are you hearing me okay?
No, I am. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
Okay,
find an article for you to check out, for both of you to check out. So
what
I'm
they would do
listening.
is try to win. They would try to provide shelter, medicine, training, because usually, like a Jesuit might go, and then he would be followed by a troop of nuns. They would provide creature comforts, the basics. They learned quickly, early on, you cannot proselytize to a person who's starving, sick, or lacks shelter. And with that, they won the hearts long before the minds of men. It didn't work in all cases, but the Catholics, if you look kind of where they went, this missionary, that missionary, did pretty darn well. I would say they probably batted 350, for career-wise in terms of successes. But it wasn't so much about spreading the word as spreading bonhomme and goodwill. And then, of course, they used a little penchant for the exotic, the smoke, the mirrors, the thurifers with incense, and the chalices, and all the other stuff that had that very deep ritualistic appeal. The ritual being actually something that the amygdala, our more core brain, responds to. And so it's pretty crazy how they involved all the tactile senses and stuff as the Catholics brought this presentation. It really was somewhat of a dog and pony show or a magic show in a lot of ways as well. Mm-hmm. And but their appeal was also, they worked with the ignorant people that didn't know how to farm, cultivate properly, maybe rotate crops. And these guys, they seemed like gods themselves. The message, though, I love what you said about the whole idea, and I'm going to shut up in 2 seconds, of this providential message in the first place, because you were talking about Calvinists, and I was thinking of another one who's a real dick shine, real mean bastard.
I didn't mention Calvinist, but I would have.
That mentioned that he told me one moment he was Calvinist, and then told me he wasn't. So he was a liar on top of it. Told me he was a doctor, and then said that was a lie. And he's a guy that has some credibility in one of the rooms that I frequent. But at any rate, I tried to ask him, how did God manage to get, through 1,500 years, find Jean Calvin, this French lawyer, who went on to butcher Christians and Catholics and fight with them alike, as competitors, and land right where you are in Middle Europe or wherever it is. Why did it take this convoluted? That's what I don't understand. And so I'm probably a closet atheist. I love that term because
OG, can you read the side, by the way? This is the argument that I just used is in the article I just posted.
Okay, I'm gonna find it.
It sounds right up your alley. And it, like the argument that you said, it sounds like that's like an intuitive argument to give against theism, but it doesn't really have ultimate force until you look at it in the context of other arguments. And I think that argument, this is called the demographics of theism, and it becomes strong when you note that, look, God is a being who picks his elect he has to have done it in an orderly fashion. he didn't do it arbitrarily. I imagine that would wreak havoc on so many different theological perspectives. So he had to have done it with some sort of plan in mind. And but the thing is, if that's the case, if that's how he picked the elect, and if you're not a Calvinist, which none of you are, I think, then he had to have chosen exact like certain times in people's lives in a way that's consistent with a plan to make it so over time we should be able to see a pattern, this pattern of theistic belief throughout the globe over time and throughout the world. But we don't see any pattern that would point to a God who moves in such ways. We cannot discern God's intentions, even when he explicitly says his intentions in sacred texts. We can't even see those intentions discerned when we look at the distribution of theistic belief around the world. Instead, it looks more likely that the messy socio-political, economic conflict, cultural phenomenon that have been moving groups of people all over the world for thousands of years. It seems like those are the reasons why we see the distribution of theistic belief rather than the design of some awesome creator deity. Does that make sense? All right, for tonight's homework, you guys, I want you to read the article that I posted in the side, and we're going to have a quiz next week on...
The thing is every time you mention the word deity or God or whatever it is, I just go to sleep. Because, there isn't.
Yeah, but as you can see, there's a lot of people who,
that's fine. I understand, but there still isn't a God. Whether a lot of people say one thing or another, it still doesn't exist.
Oh, I'm sorry you don't have a God. I really am.
All right.
Well, I'm really happy you do.
Since I am trying to make this a very selfish hangout, I'm actually going to end it.
Right.
But it was really nice talking to all of you. Ask an Atheist, you should actually talk more. Although I'm glad you walked your dog. I should probably...
Yeah, I know I was working and then I was constrained by time. I'm sorry.
Cool. And thank you, OG. And I'm sorry for the other night. I didn't mean to put you off, and I understand that being new to a community, it gets frustrating trying to make sure you're not going against any etiquette that you're unaware of. Don't worry, I make mistakes all the time, and I'm still here, so you'll be fine. Don't worry. But it was nice talking to all of you, and I really appreciate all of you coming in my room, and hopefully maybe I'll do this next week if people like this. So good night, everyone.